Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining today's session, DIY ROI, Richer Insights Without Breaking the Bank. Today's session is presented by InnovateMR. InnovateMR is a fiercely independent sampling company that delivers faster answers from business and consumer audiences. As industry pioneers, InnovateMR helps market research agencies worldwide answer business questions and uncover insights with online and mobile surveys. Today's webinar is scheduled to run about 40 minutes. While the session has been pre-recorded, please feel free to submit questions at any time and we'll get back to you as soon as possible. All participants have been muted. A recording of this webinar will be sent to all attendees in the next few days. To get us started, I'd like to introduce Jake Leal. Jake serves as Director of Client Development and Platform Solutions at InnovateMR. Jake is passionate about DIY sampling technology and empowering researchers to take the reins on their sampling needs.
Thanks, Chris, and thanks everyone for joining our webinar today. I'm excited to show you our Insights platform, which is home to our managed services dashboard, our self-sampling platform, and our text analyzer. For the purpose of today, the focus is going to be our self-sampling platform, which I'm hoping you're going to find is going to be a really easy and cost-effective way to launch your projects and get the speed and the data quality you've really come to know from the Innovate team. So that's where our focus is going to be for the remainder of the discussion. So looking at the platform in itself right now, we're basically looking at the landing page. So with that, you can kind of see two different areas of focus. On the far right, this is the managed services dashboard that I alluded to, but essentially what this would provide you is a snapshot and visibility into any of the projects that our Innovate team is managing for you. So you can see the names, completes, LOI, and you also have the ability to set up notifications and also talk to your sales rep or start a new proposal right from the platform. Since that's not quite our focus today, I'm going to turn our attention over to the left over here, which is our self-sampling platform. Here, you can see that we have a quick snapshot of the projects that we have running. You have the name, the status, your completes, and your LOI. And you'll also have the ability to navigate off of this page by looking at these three buttons down here. You can check out your projects, where you'll have an encompassed library of all the jobs you've run, where you can filter on status, on audience, and different variables. We have check feasibility, which is likely what you're going to use the most, where we can run to our feasibility tool and design an audience, set up your pricing, and then ultimately launch a job. And last but not least, we also have start a new project. So for those who are setting up proposals, weeks or months before you actually launch a project, you can go ahead and skip our feasibility tool if you already know what you're looking for and go straight to the setup. So before I go into more granular detail of the platform and how you would set up jobs, I really want to illustrate how fast it is to set up one and just see the results in real time. So before we go down into the detailed version, let's do the quick version. So if we go here, I'm going to set up a job really quick to show you. Put in some rough demographics just to give you an idea here. On the right, we can do domestic in the United States, English. We'll put in 500 completes, an LOI of 5 minutes, and we can kind of continue. So we can kind of pick and choose what we think the incidence is going to be and let it fall out. Give it a name, webinar test. Give it a project manager. We'll give it a quick category. It's a food study, I know that. Looks good. Put in the maximum budget really quick. And again, I'm going to outline all this. Quotas, I'll show you. We'll do a quick 50-50 gender split just to show you this. Okay. And then we're going to test the link really fast. Answer a couple questions. We'll terminate out. And then if the redirection is working correctly, we're going to see this beautiful green screen and we're ready to go. And if I press the button, we just went live with our project. So like I said, I wanted to show you very quickly and early on how fast you can set up a job in the platform. So while we'll let the system do its thing, we'll check back in on this. Let's start back to the home screen, and I'll show you a slower, more detailed version of how I went about what I did and how you can do that yourself. So we'll come over here, and we can see right here that our webinar test is showing the status, and soon we'll start to see completes come through. For the sake of starting from the beginning again, like I mentioned, checking feasibility is where the majority of users are going to start. So if we click Check Feasibility, we're going to come back to our Feasibility Tool. So now that we're taking a little bit of a more measured look at the platform, I usually advise users to treat this like it's a book and go from left to right with how you read the information and utilize the profiling. So with that being said, we can see here that we start with demographic information. Age, gender, education, all of it's here and available for you. We have geographic profiling, so DMAs, regions, states, zip codes. Profiling questions. So obviously, since this is our proprietary panel, we have a wide variety of options available to you. So you can pick and choose those here, or you can use the search bar. So if you were looking for maybe grocery DMs, we could type that in, and you can see all the profiling that can be around grocery as a keyword. So up top, we can see which of the following best describes your role in your household's everyday grocery purchases. We can come over to a cat's eye here, see the options available, and we can even click in and pick and choose profiling that we want to use. So, example of that. Last but not least, and this may not apply to every user's need case, but we also have an incidence check built into our platform. So in the event that you have an audience and you're not quite sure how the incidents would fall out, we give the ability right from the platform in order to get those insights and kind of help steer your proposals and ultimately your research. So with this functionality, we allow up to 300 clicks, which you will see turns out to be 25 cents a click. Now, although you do see a cost, we do like to say that this is a free incidence check. And what we mean by that is, in most cases, if you run an incidence check, subsequently, there should be a project involved. So in the event that you do run an IR check with us, and then within a month span or so, if you do run a job that does come up to, in this case, $75 or more, we're going to honor that job. And so this will ultimately get wiped away, and we'll just invoice you for the research that you conducted. So just know this is available to any of our users. And if you just want to do the IR checks, that's fine. But if you do end up running jobs with us, then you don't have to worry about the IR check cost at all. And just to kind of illustrate the last piece, this is how you'd create your question. So you select the button, come down here and select between single select or multi-select answer options. You can design your question text, pick and choose how your rows are displayed, randomized, alphabetized, or custom. And then down here, you can simply enter your row options. There's also a bulk upload option as well. So if you're pulling from a questionnaire that you're designing, you can literally copy and paste. So with that, that is our IR check. Looking over to the right side of the feasibility tool, you'll see some of the other details that you can add in. So first off, you can look at country. Currently, we have a variety of countries available on the platform. We start with the United States, but have Canada and India available. We have the EU5 available. For APAC, we have China, Japan, and Australia. And then for Latin America, we have Brazil and Mexico. We are continuing to roll out countries within the platform, but this is currently what we have available to you. Depending on your region, you can pick different languages. Here, like we saw earlier, you can put in your N size. Over here, your LOI. And ultimately, you can set your incidence, which will dictate your CPI and the feasibility that the system projects for you. So just to put in another example that we can look through, we'll put in age, throw in a gender there, and then we can do 500, put in a 10-minute LOI here. And like we illustrated, you can pick and choose your incidence and what the CPI populates as, and our fielding timeline. So here you will get your cost, your timelines, and then also you can see that your target audience is defined down here. Now, in the event that this looks good to you and you want to proceed with creating this job, all you have to do is come down here to go to Create New Project. And with that, you're basically going to start being funneled to pages that are going to help complete the setup. So as opposed to some other interfaces where you might have tabs or different links that you're going to have to jump and click and learn how to navigate, we really wanted to streamline the setup and blunt the learning curve by just funneling the pages directly in front of you, and that way it's just simple and easy to use. So as we look at this page, there's 3 criteria that we're going to have to put in order to proceed. First is going to be a project name, which we can call GenPop Test. A project manager. This is going to be anyone with a login to the Insights platform. So you may ask, okay, why do I need to designate a project manager? The reason being is that we actually have built in some intuitive and informative notifications that we can share with the project manager. So in the instance where you have a soft launch, or you go ahead and full launch out the gate and we hit your required end sizes, this project manager is going to get notified of any updates with regards to the status of the project. So that way we keep you informed versus you having to kind of stop and pull away from your day-to-day duties and check the platform itself. So again, just trying to keep you informed versus having you have extra tasks involved. And last but not least is a category. So this is just your best effort, if you will. So if we do here, we can go food and snacks. This has no ramifications with regards to invite language or profiling or anything like that. Really at its heart, this just helps us be better for you down the road. So if we see that there's a ton of research being conducted in food and snacks, or maybe pet owners, we can take that information and look at our profiling and our recruiting strategies and look to see if we can make that better for you and better for your research in the future. These 3 fields are going to be the only things you have to fill in order to continue. But if we look down here, I will note that there are some optional fields. So if we come down here, none of this is mandatory, but depending on your kind of organizational needs, you also have this available to you. So you can track projected invoicing dates, PO numbers, anticipated field start and end dates. If you're running trackers or very similar studies, you can dedupe against prior jobs. So we have all this here with fingerprinting. If you have a collaborative team approach where maybe you're going to have more than one project manager, then you can also kind of outfit a team here. So as opposed to one person getting notifications, you can kind of pick and choose if you would like multiple folks to get notifications. As we go lower, we have a note section. So if you have client requirements or if you're taking that team approach and want to hand notes off to another team member, this is a great way for you to do that. And last but not least, we have redirects. We will show you these later on in the setup, but just know if you did need to grab them early, they're available here. And I would note that they're static. So the nice thing is they're never going to change. So as you do your setup, once you kind of get the flow down, you can always just copy and paste from project to project. Okay. So with this, again, just the 3 fields and we're good to continue. As we come down here, we can see basically the screen is just to kind of keep an eye on a couple of variables, and then ultimately you have a couple more optional fields as well. So here we have a group name. It's going to carry over from what we put on the last page. So GenPop Test, and in 90 to 95% of the time, you can just keep that name how it is. I would just note that the reason why you have the ability to change this is in the event that you have a couple different scenarios, actually. You could run international projects, where maybe you'd want to differentiate the group name as the US versus the UK or some other country. Also for the purpose of trackers. So if you have wave 1 versus wave 2 or 3, again, this gives you the ability to differentiate your different groups, and that way you have more of an organizational aspect to it. For this instance, though, GenPop Test suits us just fine, so we can just keep it how it is. We see down here some of the variables from the Feasibility Tool, so we'll just give this a one-over and make sure it looks good. So your end size, your incidence, your LOI, all pull over from the previous page. Our system defaults to single URLs, but we can accommodate batch uploads. So if you have needs where you want to upload files of unique individualized links, then that's no problem for us. We can upload those and make sure we distribute each of those unique URLs for you. We have the live URL function. So if you wanted to put in the URL early, you can do that here, but not required. And then again, like we saw on the last page, there are some optional features available to you. So if we click on this, we can see there's a revenue piece. So if you are marking up the sample that you're buying from the platform and you want to track your margins, then you can put the CPI that you're selling it for, and then subsequently the system will track margin for you. You can pick and choose device types. So if you have a longer study or one that's not mobile friendly, perhaps, you can kind of pick and choose what sort of combination of devices you would like to allow. So that's available. And then down here, you have a test URL in case you have one of those available. That way, if you do test, you're not leaving data in your survey. And then last but not least, we have pre-survey messaging. This is an option that is really useful in cases where we are collecting PII, or maybe there's sensitive content that some panelists maybe want to be made aware of. So this just helps us inform panelists when appropriate, and that way they can decide if they want to participate or potentially drop out before they even begin. And that way, you know, we're not having them go 10 questions in only to find out that there is PII being requested and they don't want to participate. Or maybe it's a subject matter that they're not comfortable with. So this just allows you to inform them in advance. So with that, and again, just to summarize, we didn't have to do anything on this page. We just checked a couple things to make sure they all looked in line, and we're ready to go. We'll press save. And now we're winding down, getting to the point where we can launch the project. Essentially at this point, what you'll notice is this looks a heck of a lot like our feasibility tool. And in reality, it basically is, except for there is one added feature that is a mandatory part that we have to fill out. And then there are a couple other optional features that are available to you here that weren't available earlier. So with that, we'll start with the mandatory piece. And that's going to be the max CPI field that you see right here. So in general, what this is while we think our incidence is going to be 70% and $1.80, it's very likely that, we may not be right on the money. And oftentimes we find it's hard, and in talking to our clients, we find it's very hard to be exact when we're creating these estimates in our systems. So as opposed to kind of setting at one price point and then launching a project and finding, okay, 70% was wrong, it was actually 65. As opposed to having that moment where it goes out of scope and all of a sudden we're pausing your research and having you reevaluate and approve a new CPI, we wanted to make a more fluid environment for our users. So in order to mitigate and avoid some of that start-stop sort of scenario, we created this max CPI where you can name a maximum budget. So although $1.80 looks right, maybe you will say that $2.25 is really the most you're willing to spend for this research project. If we put $2.25 and press update, what we now see is a visual cue that we actually have downside protection all the way to 50%. So in the scenario that we discussed just a minute ago, if you launched at 70, but it came in at 65, we're not going to pause anything. We're not going to send you a notification saying you need to reevaluate things. We're going to allow the system to have some flexibility, to have that fluidity, and to continue your research knowing that we are preserving your budget at the end of the day. So with this, we're good to $2.25. And if we were to breach 50%, then that is a notification that we would send to the project manager, and we would pause the survey just because we want to be mindful of your budget. So this is the maximum CPI. The other thing that I would note just for our users is that, while downside protection is nice, upside efficiency is also built into the platform and something that you can benefit from. So if you were to come in conservative and estimate 50%, but due to circumstances such as some of our profiling or maybe just a study performing better than you anticipate, you also have the ability to benefit. So $2.25 is maybe what you started with, but if it were to come in at 70%, we will give you the better CPI. So just know, if your studies perform better, you can actually improve your cost basis, and in this case, you would have gotten $1.80 if it came in. So this is the max CPI feature, and the only feature that is mandatory to fill out before we continue off this page. Now, with that being said, there are a couple other optional things that I'll show you and that you can pick and choose if you want to leverage those for your research. If we come back to profiling questions, where earlier we saw our pre-profiled question categories, you'll notice now that we also have a create a question button right here. And so if we click on it, the UI is going to be exactly like our incidence check. But essentially what we're providing you here is the ability to create custom pre-screening questions on the fly. So in the event that our profiling maybe doesn't have exactly what you need, but you want to pre-screen in order to qualify panelists appropriately, we're not going to stop you. We let you go ahead and do that. And through here, you have the same ability to create a question, design your row options, and ultimately use this as a dynamic pre-screener before anyone enters your study. So this is available. There's no oversight, there's no pending period. So if you're launching a job at midnight and you need to put something in there, you're not going to have to wait on us. You're going to have complete discretion to go ahead and do that and launch your study. Outside of the custom screening, we also have more options. So this tab is new altogether. And what we'll look at here is there's two options you have available on this page. And so with that, the first one is going to be import targeting and quotas. Essentially, it's pretty self-explanatory, but if you did have trackers or jobs that have similar profiling or similar quotas, you don't have to do everything from scratch every time. If you look up here, each group has a number and each overall project has a number. So you can reference these and copy and paste them into here and import your profiling or quotas. So this is a feature available to you. Outside of that, we also have census wrap. So in the event that your research requires you need to be representative to census, maybe it's click balancing, or maybe it's just hard quotas, we accommodate that as well. So as opposed to you having to do the tedious process of entering in different rows and ranges, right? And then also having to have the underlying knowledge of knowing which percentage goes with which row, we take care of all of that for you. So it's as simple as checking these boxes. And if we do that, then all of this would update down here, and you would simultaneously have all of your profiling rep to census, and then our quotas would also match rep to census for you as well. So we would do all that heavy lifting. Okay. So at this stage, we've put in the max CPI, we've looked at the custom pre-screening option, and we've looked at some of our other options, and we're good to go. And so now, if we look over here to the left, we're going to look at our quotas and then ultimately launch our job. So with that, if I go to quotas, here we can see that we're taken, and there's just basically one button that we can use to start to structure our quotas. So if we come in here, just a very general example, right? You have the ability to set quotas based on any of the variables that you have for profiling. So like we saw earlier, if we wanted to, just do a 50-50 gender split, I'll kind of do that a little slower this time. But you go to gender, you can go to male, you could put your percentage or your overall N size, and you press save. And if you want to do the opposite of that, we can come over here to the duplicate button, click it, toggle the variables, and we're good to go. So again, a little slower than what I did in the initial example, but basically that's a 50-50 gender split. And it defaults to survey completes or hard stops. But if you wanted to do click balancing, like I mentioned on the last screen, you just simply click this button right here, and now these will be click-ins versus hard stops. So this is just a quick example of our quotas and what we can accommodate. Last but not least, it's just testing redirects, which we did earlier. But as we mentioned, going a little slower this time, if we come down here, our redirects are provided again, like I mentioned. And so you can set them up. Again, they are static, so you can pull them and they'll be the same every time. And you'll go in and you'll set up your URL. You want to press Save Changes. And like we did earlier, you'll come down here and press Test Survey Links. And you'll open up your browser window and you'll be able to test for a complete or termination, either works. And ultimately, you'll be good to go. So at this stage, as we saw earlier on, we've accomplished everything from start to finish. We've defined an audience, we've given a naming convention, we've set up a project manager, and we put in a max CPI. That's basically it. And so really at this point, like we saw, you've launched your project and you're good to go. You can walk away and you can go about your day. But as we saw earlier on, you can do it as quick as 2 or 3 minutes once you're familiar with the platform. But now you also have a more step-by-step approach to how you can go in and kind of finesse some of the details with the platform as well. Before I wrap up with our webinar today, I wanted to show you 2 other aspects of the platform that don't necessarily apply to everybody, but they can be useful depending on your needs. So with that, I'm going to turn our attention down here to supply partners. If I click on this, what we're seeing here is the ability to add in external supply. Essentially what we're doing is we want to give you the flexibility to have a mixed sample methodology. So we don't have to be the only game in town. If you have trackers or any research where you need to accommodate a sort of sample mix, that's okay, and we can allow that. So if you have an API, for example, we could put in a Fulcrum API for you here, where you would be able to set your CPI and then give it an N size or an allotment to your total complete. So that's all available here. Or if you don't have any API connections, we give the ability to do manual partners as well. So you would just create a supplier profile. You could pick and choose it here. And ultimately, again, you can give them an allocation, set a CPI, and be able to control all of that through the platform. And with these options, the other nice thing is not only just having the ability to choose, but you also can use the self-sampling tool as a sort of sample management tool, really. So with our quotas and everything we set up, whether it's gender in this case or any other more nuanced quotas, all of the partners that you have contributing to your study will have to adhere to these quotas as well. So you can kind of control everything, control the flow all through one platform. The other added benefit is that by putting other partners through the platform, you can also take advantage of the quality measures that the Innovate panel has built in. So whether that is some of our back-end checks, looking at quality, looking for bot traps, looking at reCAPTCHA, Twilio, all these things that we have available on the back end, your panel partners would go through that as well. And then also our text analyzer technology that we have built into our platform is something that you would take advantage of on top of that. So that would be an open-ended prompt that we can design where you can have all of the panelists, whether it's Innovate or external, go through our text analyzer technology in order to just really build in on the quality that we can provide. And so obviously there's more information on that, but that's something we could share later on. And last but not least, outside of the supply partners, I want to close up with our perks program up top. And so with this, one thing I want to make note of is that the Insights platform and the self-sampling tool in itself is all completely free to use, and you have free access to it. So there are no contracts that we would need you to sign in order to have access to this. There's no licensing fees. There's no project minimums. There's nothing like that. So with other tools, sometimes there are some of those hurdles and obligations that you have to have. But I do want to stress that there's none of that here. It's simply paying for the completes that you want to keep at the end of the day. So with that, obviously, in giving you the choice and giving you the flexibility with your research, we also kind of wanted to take another stance, and that is showing our appreciation and rewarding you in the event that you do choose to use us and you use us repeatedly. So with that, we have our rebates program right here, or we call it perks program. And so with that, we have tiers of sample spend. And as you hit these tiers, you will actually get automatic rebates off your future spend for the rest of the calendar year. So, for this example, if you're at the silver tier, anything after $25,000, you would get a 3% rebate automatically. And then it's until you hit the gold tier, which then would turn into a 5% rebate on anything going forward. So again, this is just a simple way for us to show our appreciation and to actively give back and reward those who are using the platform. And the last thing I'll cap off with this is this is nothing that you have to keep track of. We keep track of all of it manually on our own, and we basically will give you the rebates on the invoices that we send to you. So there's nothing that you have to keep track of. We'll do all the heavy lifting for you there. So with that, as we wrap up our webinar today, I just want to thank you all again for taking the time and joining us. And if we go back to the home page and check on our original project, we can see here we've hit our 500 completes with a little extra. The project just paused itself, and everything's a wrap. Thanks again for checking out the Insights platform, everyone, and I hope you have a great afternoon.